Welcome back to TYT Sports. The NFL draft will start on Thursday. The first round will be mostly defensive. And I mean there's going to be a big influx of top 5 picks, almost all of which, save for Leonard Fournette, are likely to be defensive players. And if you go out towards the top 10, you're looking at 8 of 10, at least projected to be defensive players. Now, some of that could change based on draft day trades. Twitter is always a lot of fun during the NFL and NBA drafts. Some of the most fun days on Twitter altogether, just because there's so much news. You want to know what's happening first. You want to know what's happening when. And of course, it's also like the revival of the NFL season. I'm not the biggest of NFL fans. I think the channel knows that. But what's important here is that for these 3-4 days, it puts the NFL back in the spotlight instead of the NBA playoffs for just a couple of days. It makes you think about the season coming up. The schedules also just came out. I think they leaked. Not sure if they were supposed to be that way, but that was an interesting note too. Even though we kind of knew who was playing who, it's just a matter of when, because they settle those things 4 or 5 years in advance. I just want to go over some of the players to look out for in the first round for the NFL draft. Myles Garrett looks like he's still going to be the #1 pick. We talked about him a little bit. It makes sense for the Cleveland Browns. They need a quarterback, we know that, but if you can't get a game-changing quarterback, build your defense. At least find a way to win games without relying on the quarterback. We've seen, there's got to be 20 teams in the NFL who can still find a way to win 5, 6, or 7 games a year because they're not the worst defensive and offensive team every single year. But we've kind of talked about that. Now, Leonard Fournette's an interesting one too, but I'm going to go a little bit past that because I think Christian McCaffrey, because he's falling to a team like the Carolina Panthers. And the Carolina Panthers, at least in this mock draft that I have in front of me, the Carolina Panthers are such an interesting team going into next season. They were a game away from winning the Super Bowl against the Von Miller and the Broncos, Peyton Manning and the Broncos. And then they came back with a terrible season, and Cam Newton looked more like the Cam Newton before his MVP campaign. But maybe an immediate impact weapon like that of Christian McCaffrey makes Cam Newton's life a little bit easier. Maybe Christian McCaffrey's that type of fit. We know he's explosive. He was the most fun college football player all of last season. And as for the notes, though Jonathan Stewart's far from the only one to blame for Carolina's woes in the offense, the Panthers slipped last season, and running the ball puts the spotlight once again on his durability. So they're talking about how you need to replace him. And the thing with McCaffrey, he can do it out of the backfield. He can catch balls out of the backfield. He can run it straight up the gut. He's got some of the best first step explosive speed in terms of the running backs available. As for one of the defensive players, look, the Jets, when they had their success under Rex Ryan, it was because of defense. They're also a team who's going to be struggling without a premier quarterback to really take all the pressure off and find a way to score touchdowns. So one of the things that they are going to do, I would think, is take either Marshon Lattimore or Malik Hooker. Both of them come out of Ohio State. Lattimore is a cornerback and Hooker is a safety, and both of them are exceptionally talented at what they do. For example, the Jets need this type of player because they surrendered 30 scores and only picked off 10 passes. And this also seems to be, as CBS Sports is putting it, the best player available strategy. Jonathan Allen is another guy that might slip into there for the Jets, but it seems like out of it, there's no offensive player that I would think would go there. The only thing that could change that is some are saying that if the Jaguars opt to not take Leonard Fournette and he falls to the Jets, then maybe you take, again, best player available. In that case would be Leonard Fournette. Mitch Trubisky, of course, you're going to see everywhere because the Cleveland Browns are the number 12 overall pick, and they made the wonderful trade for Brock Osweiler. What do you say about the Browns at this point? What do you say? What do you say after 20 years, my entire lifetime of Browns football? You've seen like pretty much failed quarterback attempt after failed quarterback attempt. Maybe Mitch Trubisky's the next big thing, or maybe he fizzles out like every single other Browns quarterback. He does have work ethic, but is anybody truly blown away by Mitch Trubisky and what they've seen on the tape? I think he's not Andrew Luck coming out of college. He's not Peyton Manning coming out of college. He's not any of these guys that we know of. And also, he doesn't seem like the diamond in the rough that was Dak Prescott, or the diamond in the rough that was Russell Wilson. He doesn't seem like that type of player, at least from what we know. But what do the Browns have to do? They have to take him. But fortunately, they also have the number 1 overall pick. We're going to get to Reuben Foster and Jabril Peppers in just a second because Reuben Foster and Jabril Peppers are under positive drug test diluted sample, and I'll get into all of what that means in just a second. J.J. Watt's brother, or cousin, coming out of Wisconsin also to the Detroit Lions. That's on that draft pick. And then I got to say, man, if Deshaun Watson really is the 25th overall pick in this draft, I really think the Cleveland Browns should take Deshaun Watson and not Mitch Trubisky. I know there's all these things about, I think if you want an immediate impact and you want to win some more games now, you got to throw Deshaun Watson into the fire and throw him into the Browns organization. It would be unfair to Watson. I don't think anybody really wants to play there. But if Deshaun Watson does go to the Texans, his job will be a lot easier than that of the Cleveland Browns. If you think about it, defensively, the Texans are extremely good. And we know that J.J. Watt's coming back. And the idea of having Watt and Clowney attacking your quarterback on both ends means you're probably not going to have to score all that much to win football games. So Deshaun Watson's a big stage guy. He might be Vince Young, but I think he's got some better tools than Vince Young had for the NFL level. And I mean better, I don't mean let's blow this out of proportion. He's the next Michael Vick or Russell Wilson, or who do they use? Everyone runs. Cam Newton. Vick changed the game. Why Jabril Peppers? Jabril Peppers is my favorite player in the draft. I think Jabril Peppers is one of those 5-tool, can play so many positions if you pair him with the right type of coach. For example, they have him pegged in this draft as the 30th overall pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Mike Tomlin is that type of coach to use Jabril Peppers in a way that's not just defensive back, that's not just safety, that could be wide receiver or running back, can use him in the return game. But the problem is that both him and Reuben Foster from Alabama tested positive for a diluted sample at the NFL Scouting Combine in March, according to Adam Schefter. What that means and how it could impact his upcoming career, all via ESPN. Kevin Seifert did a good job of NFL Nation on this one. Basically what happens is if you're trying to cover something up, a lot of the time what you can do is drink a ton of water. And what we'll do is that it will dilute the entire test. Think about it this way. If you drop an eyedropper of balsamic into a plate of vinegar, right, you'll see that little balsamic swimming around. Now imagine taking a ton of vinegar and dropping all of that on top of your little drop, and all of a sudden that sample gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's even harder to see. That's the idea behind the process. If you're wondering, I had Italian food this weekend, and it was very, very good. That's why I came up with balsamic and oil and vinegar and all that stuff. But in this case, it makes sense. Also, people who wanted to pass weed tests, like friends in high school, would do the same thing. Drink a ton of water, and hopefully you can just wash out everything in your body. Now his agent, again, let's take that with a grain of salt because it is his agent, said that he was ill before the combine and was trying to battle cramps, so he was drinking like 8 to 10 or something. I don't want to say gallons of water. I feel like you'd drown if you had 8 gallons of water. But granted, you see the people at the gym with the gallon jug, and they're just chugging away at that stuff. Or 8 to 10 bottles of water, whatever the exact amount was. It doesn't necessarily mean he was on any kind of performance-enhancing drug. It's only speculation. It doesn't necessarily mean he was smoking weed. Also only speculation. Granted, you all know my policy on weed. It's just the NFL has a dumb policy about it. So you have to follow the NFL's dumb policy. And the truth of the matter is, if it's a week before, 2 weeks before, the most important day of your life, the NFL draft, in this case for some of these players, just don't smoke. I know 420 is right before it. Maybe the NFL draft should be before 420. Boom, solve everything. But the one point that I wanted to make from Kevin Seifert here in NFL Nation was it puts Peppers and Foster in the NFL's drug program. It's a stage 1 of the program, no discipline, so 180 days. And they cooperate. And do teams really care about a diluted sample? According to Seifert, yes. Multiple violations of the drug policy, no matter the cause, take players off the field. So if they were to keep having diluted samples, they could miss playing time. Look, if we're comparing apples to oranges and apples to other types of fruit, diluted sample is not nearly as bad as being pinched with an actual PED or something that's a banned substance. So something to keep an eye on. If it causes them to fall, that could be a steal for some teams in the second round. I don't think Jabril Peppers is a second-round pick. I think he should be towards the end, but a first-round pick. And he'd go, again, these type of guys that go to good teams like the Steelers, like the Cowboys, like the Patriots, like all these teams that have winning ways and winning cultures, and they get a guy like Jabril Peppers. It's a scary weapon to have, just in 5 different positions. Whatever you need for him, seems like a durable, fun guy to have around too. So, at least in the NFL drafts note. Lastly, I'll leave you with these couple elements. We'll wrap up the NFL draft preview. So I was in the wrong on this one. My immediate reaction to this was I thought it was funny. I thought it was laughable. So ESPN once again won't tip picks in the draft, which means, like, if you're Adam Schefter or maybe even Woj, you know who's going to be drafted when. Maybe about a minute or two before Commissioner Goodell walks out into the podium and goes, and with the number 3 pick in the NFL draft, the X, Y, and Z select A, B, and C, they put it on Twitter, and they can just say the number 3 pick will be. And if it's a verified account or an ESPN account, you would take that as true. And of course, when it comes to Twitter, you have to look into it a little bit more, but in this case, you kind of want to know the information quickly. I thought that was the overwhelming majority. I thought that if you can just know the information, and you didn't really have to watch the NFL draft, well then, great, just follow it on your phone. Turns out, people really like watching the NFL draft. Good on them. I'm not blaming them for that. So I wanted to go, I think there's, it's the A elements from this morning. I think there's 3 of them. One of them was a poll from 2015, which said 85% of people, according to Pro Football Talk, 15,000 votes, again, 2015, but 85% of people in 2015 said, no, they don't want the draft picks tipped to them. So I'm in the 11%, going like, screw it, send them over my way. I doubt that number's changed so much. I don't think Twitter has grown so much in 2 years, but I'm sure it's maybe down to like 75%. Lastly, Trey Wingo's hosting it, and he had a great quote that I wanted to read, and I also wanted to read Seth Markman's quote. So Seth Markman is a producer over at ESPN. This was his quote from SI.com, and there's just one very funny part of this. So we'll go to that quote first. I realize that there are those who disagree with this approach, but we are not in the business of angering our loyal viewers, and I personally like the unspoiled nature of this event. Fans love sitting on the edge of their seats to hear what the commissioner says. I don't necessarily know if fans love to sit on the edge of their seats listening to what Roger Goodell says for the reasons that you think fans are excited to hear what Roger Goodell says. There is obviously a partnership between ESPN and the NFL. There's a partnership with ESPN and a lot of sports organizations, but maybe none bigger than the ESPN and the NFL. I think you know my thoughts on that. For more, we can always discuss it. But I just thought that was a funny quote. I just thought it was a funny quote. That's all. I'm just drawing attention to it. Maybe you guys don't. Maybe I'm crazy. Regardless, we have to go over to Trey Wingo's quote, because Trey Wingo, another very good host at ESPN. I like to give credit to the hosts that I do enjoy there, and I have done that in the past. There's many I don't enjoy. There's some I do. Trey Wingo is not nearly as bad as some of the others. Actually does a pretty good job, and he's going to be calling all 7 rounds of this draft, so he's got 4 days of HELL coming his way, because that is a lot of work and it's a lot of prep. So let's just go to the Wingo quote, because he was a great quote. Let's be honest, the draft is really a list of names called out in a certain order. We want to televise the draft. I think the response understandably was, why? I'm sorry, when ESPN years ago went to the NFL and said we want to televise the draft, I said, why? It's turned into a very big thing. Look at the NFL scouting combine, that's become a huge deal. NFL Media Day for the Super Bowl has become a huge deal. And that's a lot based on their agenda. And I don't mean agenda negatively in this sense. I mean it in the way that the NFL is the most watched sport in the country. Nothing even comes close to it. They own a day of the week, as people have said. They actually almost own 2 days of the week if you count Monday Night Football. And they're about to own about 2.5 days of space. And they're gonna rip that from the NBA because people love their football, and I don't blame them for it. It's a great sport. I just think that there's progress that can be made in terms of how we handle and talk about it. Now, your turn. Comment below, like, favorite, subscribe. Who are the players to watch in the first round? Who do you want your team to take and why? Follow me on Twitter at JasonRubin91 and all the good stuff. I keep looking at the red light on top of the camera because it's staring at me, Edwin.